Richard Gowan, United Nations and Multilateral Diplomacy Director at the International Crisis Group. Welcome to Arabiya, sir.
Thank you for having me on the show.
It's a pleasure. I'd like to start by congratulating you and the ICG with the 30th anniversary of the ICG being founded in 1995. And your main mission is to prevent, as I understand, wars and shape policies, building safer world. And now looking back over these 30 years, what are the most notable ICG achievements during this period? And also, if you can tell us who funds the ICG?
So the International Crisis Group was set up in the mid-1990s after the horrific massacres in Bosnia and in Rwanda. And our overarching goal is to try and find peaceful solutions to conflicts, but also to make the world aware of where violence is on the rise. And so if you go back 20 years, I think the organization played a very important role raising awareness of the humanitarian disaster in Darfur, in Sudan, where tragically, again, we see violence today. But we've also been part of high-level diplomatic processes. Our advice played a significant part in crafting the 2015 Iranian nuclear deal. And I should say that we also have colleagues working on current humanitarian challenges like the risks of famine in Afghanistan. We work across the globe, from Venezuela to the Philippines. Sometimes our advice has impact. Sometimes we warn of a conflict, but we can't get the necessary political attention to stop it, but we do try. In terms of our funding, we are lucky to have a very wide range of funders, including some governments. For example, the governments of Canada and Norway are very generous. We have funding from some major foundations in the US and also from philanthropists who want to contribute in their own way to international peace.
Conflict prevention is much more effective than solving the conflicts, which is one of the pillars of the International Crisis Group. How does the ICG contribute to conflict prevention?
So the basis of our work is political analysis. And our brand is that in any given country, in any given conflict, we talk to all sides. So we will talk to both the government and opposition members in Venezuela. We will talk to the Taliban in Afghanistan, even when there were times when others would not talk to them. And what we're trying to do is understand the political motivations for their willingness to use violence. Now, once we've done that analysis, there's another arm of the organization that goes to major centers of decision making, to Washington, to the United Nations, to the European Union, to the African Union, and we offer advice. And we say, this is what we're seeing on the ground. This is the best way that we can recommend to avoid a conflict. And as I say, sometimes our messages are heard, sometimes our messages are not heard, but we think that we're using our analysis to improve policy.
Do you advise governments and multilateral organizations in conflict prevention, and do they accept your advice?
So we do offer advice to many governments around the world. And then we also have a focus on certain multilateral institutions such as the UN Security Council. So I'm based here in New York. I lead our liaison work with the UN. And every single day I'm sitting with diplomats from different members of the Security Council talking about the major issues on the Council agenda. So that could be Gaza, that could be the Democratic Republic of Congo, it could be the Korean Peninsula. And certainly people listen to us. We're a trusted source, people know that we're impartial, and definitely there have been moments where we make recommendations about how to frame Security Council resolutions or how to alter Security Council sanctions that do get listened to. There are also times when the politics is very, very hard. We called repeatedly in 2023 and 2024 for an early ceasefire in Gaza. I think a lot of the diplomats we were talking to accepted our advice and did push for a ceasefire. But obviously at that time, the Biden administration was opposed to resolutions calling for a ceasefire at the UN. So it can be very frustrating.
Did multilateralism or multilateralist diplomacy fail in Sudan and Gaza? And can this be remedied?
I think we have to be very frank with ourselves. Crisis Group was founded at a time when the UN was failing in situations such as Bosnia. 30 years later, tragically, we see the UN failing again. The UN has failed the people of Gaza, the people of Sudan, but also the people of Myanmar and Ukraine.
When you say the UN, do you mean the Security Council?
Above all, the Security Council.
Which is governed by the veto.
Which is governed by the veto. So you're right, it's not the UN. It's the big states that stop the UN acting. Yeah. And I think we are in a period where international cooperation is under a lot of pressure. We're seeing much more geopolitical competition. And it is true that even where many UN members want to see the end to a war, often there are actors in Moscow, in Washington, perhaps in Beijing, who are going to block multilateral action. That actually means that my colleagues are spending more time focusing away from multilateral institutions and more time talking to individual governments who may have the leverage to put a halt to violence in some of the places that we track.
I'd like to ask you opinion, and as a representative here of the International Crisis Group, on the Palestine 20-point peace plan envisaged by President Trump. What are the pitfalls as you see them? And how does ICG rate the chances of the successes of this particular plan?
Well, look, first and foremost, we would say that we are very glad that President Trump put a lot of political capital on the line to get this deal. And I think we've been a bit surprised in general by how keen President Trump is to be a peacemaker, whether it's in Africa, in Gaza, or even in Southeast Asia. Looking at the deal, there's a first order problem, which is how do you keep the ceasefire going in the next few weeks? I mean, we've already seen some clashes again between Israel and Hamas. There is a real risk that the deal falls apart before a lot of the points can be put into action. Looking further ahead, I think the big question is now, can we set up a credible stabilization force in Gaza that will be bringing together troops, probably from the Arab world, but also from elsewhere, to maintain peace? I think in the immediate term, we need a Security Council resolution that will provide a strong legal backstop for that force. I think that's essential for many countries to be willing to send soldiers. And then we need to put together a military operation that is robust, that can deter violence from spoilers in Gaza, but can also protect civilians on the ground. I think if we can get the force on the ground, that will give us time to then move towards more serious political discussions of the progress we need towards a Palestinian state, which has to be the ultimate end goal of this entire peace effort.
Did ICG and other institutions fail in detecting the Libyan crisis and the civil war that took place in Libya?
I think it's true to say that Crisis Group and almost every other conflict prevention organization was taken by surprise by the revolutions across the Arab world and especially in Libya in 2011. And I think that it's a good reminder that however good your analysis, however good your expertise, politics takes you by surprise. And politics took us by surprise in 2011. I think in looking at Libya, we did very good analysis, now almost 15 years ago, talking about how there was a risk of clan structures, armed groups pulling the country apart. We didn't get everything right, but we were aware that there was a very, very high risk of the country fragmenting. We've continued to work on Libya ever since. I think we've been offering some good advice about how the rival factions can work together, especially on economic issues and energy issues. But you don't get everything right all the time.
Does the same apply, what you just said, on Sudan?
I think on Sudan, we have been warning of the current violence, the current breakdown, very, very clearly in recent years. The exact moment of a spike in violence in
The
Khartoum,
4th of April, yeah.
that I think did catch us a little off guard, but we had been very clear that there was a risk of a breakdown in Sudan, and more recently we have been warning as loudly as we can about the risks of mass slaughter in Darfur, especially around the city of El-Fasher. So I think that tragically this is a situation where we have seen the direction of travel, we have seen the risks, but it's been incredibly difficult to get a political response because everyone has been focused on Gaza or Ukraine.
So where is diplomatic prevention come? I mean, if we saw the signs way ahead and we're expecting it, where's the international community? Where's the UN? Where's everybody? Why didn't they do something more to prevent it becoming what it became now?
I think that tragically the international community and bodies like the UN Security Council have very limited bandwidth. And we're in a moment of very high geopolitical competition where really the big powers can only focus on a few issues that are central to their concerns. So the Security Council has been focused on Russia's aggression against Ukraine. It's been overwhelmingly focused and rightly focused on Gaza. It's been focused on the Iranian nuclear issue. Sadly, other conflicts like Sudan, we've seen them drifting away from the center of diplomatic debate.
But even this concentration with the polarization inside the Security Council render it ineffective.
Well, the Security Council is not completely paralyzed. It continues to pass resolutions on many situations. But we have to be honest, it has been ineffective on some very major crises. I also think it's worth saying that if the Security Council had focused more on Sudan, if countries were willing to put more effort into dealing with a situation like Sudan, I believe that's the sort of situation where the Security Council could have more impact. Perhaps this awful, awful breakdown will teach council members a lesson. But I think we've also got to recognize that in a very divided geopolitical environment, it may be groups like the African Union, it may be coalitions of regional powers that are going to have to lead on ending wars such as the Sudanese war. It won't always be the UN.
What current situations do you foresee could turn into conflicts now in the world? And do you assist in advance to prevent that happening?
Well, so right now we're very focused on the US military buildup near Venezuela. We do believe that there is a risk that the US will attempt some sort of regime change operation in Venezuela that could backfire because that could lead to a real breakdown. And we have been sending out warnings saying that there are huge risks here. But we're also looking at other regions that get less attention internationally, such as the Sahel. We're deeply concerned that in the Sahel you have a number of weak governments dealing with major threats from terrorist groups. And we don't see a real international strategy now to stabilize that region. I worry that 5 to 10 years down the road, you could see very widespread violence in the Sahel. And we will look back and we will say, we could have identified that coming. We did identify this coming, but we didn't do enough to stop it.
Richard Gowan, United Nations and Multilateral Diplomacy Director at the International Crisis Group. We thank you for your insight and we thank you for this interview, sir. I wish you the best
Thank you
of
very
luck.
much indeed.
Thank you, sir.